The wind howled as Samuel pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, staring up at the foreboding silhouette of the abandoned asylum. The stormy night cast eerie shadows on the building's decaying facade, broken windows resembling hollow eyes staring back at him. He hesitated at the gate, the iron grating rusted and bent, as if it too had tried to escape the horrors within. "This is it," Samuel muttered to himself, clutching a worn map and a flickering flashlight. "The place where it all began." As he stepped inside, the atmosphere shifted. The air grew colder, carrying the faint scent of dampness and decay. His footsteps echoed through the empty corridors, the sound swallowed by the darkness. Every creak of the floorboards, every rustle of the wind seemed to whisper secrets long forgotten. His heart pounded with a mix of excitement and trepidation. He had always been drawn to the unknown, but tonight felt different. There was a heavy weight in the air, an unspoken warning. In a cluttered room filled with the remnants of a bygone era, Samuel's flashlight beam danced across dusty furniture and forgotten trinkets. He was about to move on when the light caught something unusual. An old, dusty trunk sat in the corner, its lid slightly ajar. With a creak, he opened the trunk and found an antique doll inside. Its porcelain face, though cracked, still bore a haunting beauty. The doll's blue eyes seemed to pierce through the darkness, staring directly at him. Samuel felt an inexplicable connection to the doll, as if it were calling out to him. "What are you doing here?" he whispered, gently lifting the doll from the trunk. Its craftsmanship was exquisite, but there was something unsettling about it. The doll seemed almost alive. He turned it over in his hands, noting the delicate stitching of its clothes and the lifelike quality of its features. A shiver ran down his spine. He knew he should leave it behind, but something compelled him to keep it. Placing the doll carefully in his backpack, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just made a fateful decision. Samuel set up camp in the asylum's library, surrounded by ancient tomes and dusty shelves. The room was filled with the scent of old paper and a lingering sense of abandonment. As he examined the doll, the feeling of unease grew stronger. The shadows seemed to move, twisting and turning in the corners of his vision. "It's just my imagination," he told himself, trying to focus on his research. But the doll's unblinking gaze made it hard to concentrate. He placed it on a nearby table, but even then, it felt like it was watching him. The night deepened, and the oppressive silence of the asylum pressed down on him. The flickering candlelight cast dancing shadows on the walls, creating an eerie atmosphere. Samuel lay on his makeshift bed, staring at the ceiling, unable to sleep. The doll's presence was like a dark cloud hanging over him, filling his mind with thoughts of the asylum's sinister past. "What have I gotten myself into?" he wondered, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The first night, Samuel was plagued by vivid nightmares. In his dream, the asylum was alive with activity. Patients in tattered gowns roamed the halls, their faces twisted in pain and madness. Sinister doctors performed cruel experiments, their expressions devoid of empathy. The doll appeared throughout the dream, its eyes following him everywhere. He woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding. The room was dark and the doll sat where he had left it, but it seemed to have moved slightly. Samuel's breath caught in his throat. "This can't be real," he whispered. But the fear was palpable. He reached for his flashlight, casting its beam around the room. Nothing. just shadows and silence, but the doll's unblinking eyes seemed to mock his fear. Determined to understand the doll's origins, Samuel delved into the asylum's archives. He found old records and journals detailing the history of the asylum and its infamous Dr. Blake. The doctor was notorious for his unethical experiments, and one entry in particular caught Samuel's eye. The journal mentioned a doll used in rituals to transfer the suffering of patients into an object, meant to contain their pain and madness. Samuel's hands shook as he read the entries, the ink smudged but still legible. Could this be the same doll? He wondered aloud. The more he read, the more he felt the weight of the doll's tragic history pressing upon him. It wasn't just an artifact. It was a vessel for the asylum's darkest secrets. While exploring the basement, Samuel discovered a hidden compartment in the wall. Inside, he found a diary wrapped in stained cloth. As he began to read, ghostly figures of former patients started to appear around him, their translucent forms barely visible in the dim light. The air grew colder, and Samuel felt their anguish as if it were his own. The spirits reached out to him, their faces reflecting pain and longing. "What do you want from me?" Samuel cried, backing away. But the spirits did not answer. They simply hovered, bound to the doll, their silent pleas echoing in the darkness. Samuel discovered a detailed sketch of the doll in the diary, showing its creation from the personal belongings of different patients. Each piece carried a fragment of their soul, and the annotations revealed the dark purpose behind its construction. As he read by flashlight, the shadows around him seemed to deepen. The delicate features of the doll and the tragic history it held became clearer. Samuel's fascination grew, mingling with revulsion as he uncovered the horrifying secrets documented within. To free the spirits, I must perform the ritual, he realized, his voice barely above a whisper. The weight of this revelation settled heavily on his shoulders. Determined to free the trapped spirits, Samuel gathered the items mentioned in the diary: a ceremonial dagger, candles, and a book of incantations. He set up the ritual space in the asylum's chapel, the air thick with the scent of old paper and wax. As he prepared, his hands shook slightly, but his resolve was firm. The spirits watched silently, their faces filled with a mix of fear and anticipation. Samuel knew this was their only chance for peace. "This has to work," he muttered, lighting the candles and placing the doll in the center of the circle. The flickering flames cast an eerie glow on the doll's porcelain face. As Samuel held the ceremonial dagger above the doll, he began to chant the incantation from the book. The room seemed to pulse with energy, the air growing thick and heavy. The spirits drew closer, their forms more defined and their expressions filled with hope. "Release them!" Samuel chanted, his voice echoing through the empty halls. Each word felt like it carried the weight of the asylum's history. He felt a connection to the spirits, their pain and suffering intertwined with his own. As the ritual reached its climax, the doll began to change. Its porcelain skin cracked, and the glow in its eyes faded. The transformation was both eerie and beautiful, as if the doll was shedding its malevolent past. Samuel watched in awe as the spirits' forms started to dissipate, their faces showing relief and gratitude. "It's working," he whispered, tears streaming down his face. The oppressive atmosphere of the asylum lifted, replaced by a gentle warmth, The doll, once a vessel of pain, now lay lifeless. A bright, ethereal light enveloped the room as the spirits ascended, finally free from their torment. Samuel watched, tears in his eyes, understanding the gravity of what he had accomplished. The air was filled with a gentle warmth, and the oppressive atmosphere of the asylum lifted. "They're free," he said softly, feeling a profound sense of peace. The spirit's expressions showed relief and gratitude, their forms becoming lighter and more ethereal until they disappeared completely. Samuel sat alone in the now silent basement, the doll lying lifeless beside him. His expression was one of quiet reflection and weary relief. The soft light of dawn filtered through a small window, casting a gentle glow on his features. "It's over," he sighed, knowing that the spirits were finally at peace. The room was serene and still, a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded moments before. The doll, now just an inanimate object, no longer held any power. Samuel stood up, ready to leave the asylum and its dark history behind. But as he walked away, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets the world still held, waiting to be uncovered. Jacob, a 20-something freelance graphic designer living in an old Victorian house inherited from his grandmother, has always been drawn to the peculiar and eerie aspects of life. Among the oddities left behind is Jeffrey, a vintage clown doll with painted-on smiles and glassy eyes that seem to follow Jacob wherever he goes. Initially dismissing it as mere childhood nostalgia, Jacob places Jeffrey on a shelf in his studio, an unsettling addition that feels more like a conversation starter than a haunting presence. One night, while working late into the early hours, Jacob is jolted awake by strange noises echoing from the studio. He shrugs it off as creaks of an aging house, but soon notices that Jeffrey has changed positions, now sitting upright instead of slumped over. Disturbed but skeptical of his own imagination, Jacob locks Jeffrey away in the basement and sets up a security camera aimed at the storage area to capture any further incidents. As days pass, Jacob reviews the footage each morning with increasing dread. The first few recordings show nothing unusual. However, on the fourth night, he witnesses something chilling. The doll's arm twitching slowly before freezing back into its original position. Confused yet fascinated by what he sees, Jacob starts researching other accounts of haunted dolls online. He learns about cursed objects and how they can latch onto their owner's fears or insecurities. Feeling both terrorized and intrigued by this revelation, Jacob becomes obsessed with documenting every odd occurrence surrounding Jeffrey. However, things escalate quickly when one evening he hears a body that rise from the basement. A light bulb exploding just after midnight causes him to jump out of bed in panic. Reviewing the footage reveals something even more disturbing. Faint whispers can be heard right before each incident occurs. Jacob's mental state begins to deteriorate as sleep deprivation takes its toll. Shadows flicker at the edges of his vision during daylight hours. Friends grow concerned for him after he cancels social outings due to work. But they don't realize how deep he's gone down this rabbit hole. In a climactic confrontation between fear and curiosity, Jacob descends into the basement, armed with nothing but his phone for light and determination not to let fear win over reason. As he stands before Jeffrey's locked box, filled with dust and darkness, he confronts whatever force seems to emanate from within it, demanding answers for why this doll has invaded his life so thoroughly. Suddenly confronted by an overwhelming sense of dread, mixed with sorrowful echoes, the whispers now clearer, it becomes apparent that Jeffrey is not merely possessed. Rather, he's a vessel for all those who have felt forgotten or alone, including children who once played with him long ago. In a moment of clarity, fueled by empathy rather than fear, Jacob realizes that rather than destroy or abandon Jeffrey forever in isolation, which would only perpetuate negativity, he must find some way to honor these lost souls connected to the doll, allowing them peace while reclaiming control over his own life. The story ends ambiguously as viewers see him replacing Jeffrey back on display, not as an eerie reminder, but now encased within a glass cabinet adorned with flowers, a tribute showcasing photographs of forgotten children alongside explanations written lovingly beneath each frame. A final shot shows faint movements through reflections on glass, as if acknowledging their newfound connection before fading into silence. This twist leaves readers contemplating themes around memory versus possession, while grounding horror elements within human emotion. A reminder that sometimes our deepest fears are rooted not just in what we see, but also in what we choose to remember or forget.
And there, a boy standing alone in a dark street. And it's dark and cold and a little scary. There's a light bulb shining from above, and its light makes it even scarier. The boy's so serious, standing there, he doesn't even move. And he's dressed so strangely, hardly dressed at all. All alone, and he's looking ahead, as if he's looking for someone. And behind him, there's a wall all scribbled and garbage on the floor. Maybe he's lost. But he's not crying. He just stares. And he doesn't seem scared at all. And there. And in the other place, there's another boy. He, too. Also all alone in the alley. His hair is so blonde, but, a little dirty. And he's standing there, all cautious, looking around, like he's afraid of someone. And it's dark, too, and it's scary. And there's a garbage can in the corner. And the lamp above it shines dim. The boy's dressed in a simple gray t-shirt and pants. And it looks like he's run away from somewhere, or he's waiting for someone. And now the boy. Is he a Terminator already? Already in a house of some kind. He's wearing a leather jacket and jeans. He's standing there, looking down. But he's got this look on his face. Like he doesn't feel anything. And all around him, you know, toys lying around, clothes strewn about. It's horrible. The room's all messy and untidy and the lights are dim. How do they live there? And he's just standing there looking at it, and, like he's waiting for something. It's kind of scary. Oh, what is this place? Where's that girl now? It's all bright and flashing and the music's loud. And the girl there, she's got hair like this. Light brown, shoulder length. She's wearing a blue shirt and jean shorts. Standing there in the crowd, so scared, looking back. And there's this Terminator boy, also in his black jacket. He's looking at the girl in a way that's scary. It's like the girl doesn't know where to run, and the crowd around her doesn't know where to go either. Just blinking and making noise. Now they're in the car. They're so fast. The boy Kyle is driving, so serious, holding the steering wheel tightly. And there's this little girl Sarah sitting next to him, and she's scared. She keeps looking back. What's the question? The car is dark, it's so old, it's a wreck. And they're going really fast. And behind them comes a Terminator boy on a motorcycle, all black and cool. He catches up with them. It's dark outside, the lights are flashing, and it looks like it's about to catch up with them. Kyle stares ahead, not looking away, all determined and businesslike. And now it's like another world. Dusty, dirty, scary. The boy Kyle is standing alone among the ruined houses that are all broken, like something bad happened. He's wearing a big jacket, and it's all dirty and holes. Kyle's looking off into the distance, like there's something important out there. And there's just ruins all around, all broken and dark. He's all sad, like he's remembering something bad. He's standing there all alone, and only the wind is blowing. It's scary. I feel sorry for him. In the corridor of the police station, it's bright but quiet. And the Terminator boy is standing there, again in his black jacket, so serious, with a toy gun in his hands. He's completely insane. He's standing there alone, looking ahead. And there are policemen lying around, tired of fighting him. And the walls are stained red, but the Terminator boy isn't smiling, he's just standing there. It's like he's made of iron. Not afraid, not crying, just standing there in that cold light, waiting for something. And here they are, the two of them, in a room, so cozy, a little dusty. The boy Kyle is holding the girl Sarah's hand. They're both looking at each other quietly, like they understand something, but they're not telling us. Secretive. Kyle is in a gray t-shirt, Sarah is in a blue shirt, her hair so mussed. Outside, the light falls through the window, and the shadows across the room are so soft. They look calm, like they've found each other and aren't afraid anymore. Now they're in some big, dark place, with pipes and iron around, and steam everywhere. The boy Kyle is holding the metal pipe, and the girl Sarah is next to him, all scared, but looking at him so trusting and trusting. They're dressed simply, Kyle in a gray t-shirt, Sarah in her shirt and shorts. The lights are flashing red all around them, and they walk forward, like they're looking for a way out or hiding. An alarm or an accident at the factory, right? It's so scary out there, really, really scary. But Kyle goes first, like he's protecting Sarah. And now Sarah is standing there, in the big dark factory, where everything is so dirty and old. There's this big press in front of her, and underneath it something iron is crushed. The girl Sarah looks at it with a determined face. She's all disheveled and her shirt is dirty, but she's not afraid anymore. She's won. And it's so quiet in the factory, just dark silhouettes all around, like they're looking at her. The camera is kind of low, and Sarah seems so brave and strong. She just stands there and watches. Is she crying?
Dr. Emily Harris has lived all her life on the border of two worlds, the light of science and darkness, where the fears and phobias of her patients reign. As an experienced psychotherapist, she has always found an explanation for even the strangest phenomena. Her husband's death a few years ago left a deep scar, but she masterfully concealed it by keeping her cool. He'd been killed in a car accident, one of those senseless deaths where miscalculated timing, red lights, and rain become the deciding factors. She kept working, not letting the pain take over, but the loneliness soaked into her life like a morning fog, permeating all her thoughts. Every day she returned to her empty house, the same house where her happy family had once lived. Every room was filled with memories of days gone by. Sometimes Emily thought she could hear his footsteps on the stairs, feel his presence at the dinner table. But it was the fear that she was slowly becoming hostage to her own feelings, her own pain, that bothered her most. She shut herself off into her work, withdrawing from her own grief, believing she would do better with her patients. This continued until Julia entered her office, a patient who was to change her perception of reality completely. Julia was young, almost transparent. Her skin was like white marble, and her long black hair flowed over her shoulders like dark streams. But that wasn't what caught Emily's attention. In her hands was a doll, an old, time-worn doll with faded eyes and a ceramic face. Julia held it tightly to her chest, as if it were her talisman, her only defense against something inevitable. Emily studied her with her gaze, but the girl's eyes were empty, like deep wells from which no feelings could be drawn. "Hello, Julia," Emily began, trying to find common ground. "Who's that with you?" Julia raised her head as if she had been awakened from a deep sleep. "It's Lily," she answered quietly. "She's watching me." Emily raised an eyebrow, trying to catch the meaning of the words. The girl was talking about this doll as if it were a living thing, and that bothered her more than she'd expected. "Is Lily following you?" she asked cautiously. "Why?" "Because she has to." Julia's voice was as steady as mechanical. "If she doesn't watch, they'll come after me." "Who are they?" Emily felt something cold touch her back. "Those who want to hurt me." Julia held the doll tighter to her chest. "But Lily always sees. She never closes her eyes." Emily made a note in her notebook, but her anxiety began to grow. The girl was clearly suffering from severe paranoia. But what worried her even more was the feeling that she herself was beginning to believe that the doll was really watching. Every time Emily looked at Lily, it seemed to her that the doll was staring back, catching her gaze, tracking her slightest movements. But it was silly. She tried to push those thoughts away and focus on the patient. For weeks, Julia came to every session with Lily. And each time she told more and more strange details. She talked about how the doll whispers to her, warning her of impending danger, how it protects her from those who watch from the shadows. "They keep trying to get into my room," Julia once said. Her voice was full of terror, and fear shone in her eyes. "But Lily keeps them out. She puts up defenses. I saw her close the window once when I was asleep." Emily held back the urge to say something rational that would break this madness. Her mind refused to accept these stories, but with each session the atmosphere in the office became more and more pressurized. Sometimes it seemed to her that the doll actually moved when she looked away. At times, when Julia left, Lily would stay in the study. The feeling was so real that Emily began to doubt her own sanity. One day, after a particularly stressful session, she stayed in the study, pondering how to help Julia. Outside, the rain was falling, and the loud clatter of drops on the glass seemed like the echo of something distant but insistent. Suddenly, the lights in the room began to flicker. Emily looked up. At first, she thought it was just a lamp malfunction. But then she saw something strange. Lily was lying on the table in front of her. She was sure Julia had taken her. Dr. Harris's hands trembled involuntarily. Suddenly, her office no longer seemed so safe. The doll's eyes, lifeless and glassy, seemed alive. They were staring right at her. Emily shuddered and stood up quickly, trying to focus. She put the doll away in the closet and left the office, convincing herself that it was just a mistake, an accident. But the feeling of unease didn't let her go all the way home. Julia came to the last session without Lily. That was unusual. Emily was surprised, but didn't ask any questions. Perhaps Julia had finally taken her advice. "Lily's not with you?" Emily asked, still curious. "She's gone," Julia answered calmly, but there was something different in her voice. Emily tried to continue the session, but it was going strangely. Julia answered one-word answers, her eyes seemed clouded, and there was a tense silence in the room. Finally, the session ended and Julia left. Emily breathed a sigh of relief, deciding that this was the last step toward recovery. But as she was closing the office, something tinkled in the darkness. Emily turned around. The tapping was repeated, as if someone was quietly tapping a finger on the desk. She slowly approached the desk, her heart pounding in her temples. Sitting on the edge of the table was Lily. Her glass eyes were open, and they were staring at Emily. Dr. Harris froze in place. Her brain tried to find a rational explanation for what was happening, but something inside her collapsed. A doll that wasn't supposed to be here was sitting in front of her as if it were alive. Glass eyes followed her every move, and the strange feeling that Lily understood more than she seemed to crawled into Emily's mind. The knocking intensified. Now it came not only from the table, but from all directions. It echoed against the walls of the office, penetrating her consciousness like a nightmare that refused to let go. It's just a joke," she whispered, taking a step back. Julia, she'd left her here. But her voice treacherously shook. In the darkness, it seemed to her that Lily had begun to move. Or was it just a trick of the eye? Emily took another step back, but her legs gave out. She fell to her knees, and when she looked up, the doll was sitting right in front of her. Her face was just as lifeless, but her eyes glittered, as if there was a new spark of life in them. At that moment, the lights in the study went out. Silence came over Emily, dense and unbearable. She felt something cold touch her neck. "Lily," she whispered into the void, her voice filled with despair. "You're not alive, are you?" There was no response. The darkness slowly squeezed her consciousness, like a nightmare from which it was impossible to wake up. The end. Or maybe not.
At the 2024 fair, sparkling with colorful lights and filled with the laughter of children, little Lisa saw an antique doll. It looked completely different from the other toys, an old-fashioned dress, a pale face, and piercing blue eyes. Lisa, excitedly exclaiming, begged her parents for this doll. They saw nothing unusual about it, just a typical antique piece that would delight their daughter. A few days passed, and Lisa began to notice strange things. The doll, which she left on the chair, would end up in a different part of the room at night. "Mom, the doll moves on its own," she asked with surprise. Her mom just laughed, chalking it up to the child's imagination. However, one night, Lisa woke up with the feeling that someone was watching her. She got out of bed and asked tensely into the darkness, "Who's there?" The answer was silence, but when she turned on the light, the doll was sitting on her bed with a creepy smile. Lisa replied to herself with fear. This can't be happening. Each day, the fear grew. The doll moved more often, and its eyes became more lifelike. One day, Lisa made up her mind and hurriedly told her parents, "Mom, Dad, this doll is evil. We need to get rid of it." Her father sighed heavily and tried to calm her down. "Lisa, it's just a toy." At night, her parents heard a scream. Rushing into their daughter's room, they found an empty bed and the doll sitting in the middle of the room with a terrifying smile. "Where's Lisa?" her father asked with agitation, but there was no answer. Days went by, but Lisa never returned. Her parents desperately searched for her, but all efforts were in vain. "We searched the entire house, every corner," her father said with regret. "She couldn't have just disappeared," her mother added sadly. They hid the doll in the storage room, but one day while cleaning, the mother noticed it back on the couch. She grabbed the doll and coldly said, "You know where Lisa is? Speak." The doll only smiled wider, its eyes glowing with a sinister light, sarcastically noting to herself. The mother realized this was no ordinary toy. That evening, when the father came home, he found his wife in the same room where Lisa had vanished, holding the doll. Looking into its eyes, he felt a chill run through his body. "We have to get rid of it," he declared firmly. They threw the doll into the fireplace, but the flames didn't touch it. Doubtfully reaching out, the father picked up the doll and took it to the garden. When he returned, Lisa was standing on the doorstep. Sighing with relief, the mother ran to her daughter, but Lisa's eyes were just as empty and lifeless as the doll's. Laughing nervously, the father realized their nightmare was only beginning. This eerie tale, one of the most interesting stories filled with the mysteries of the night and true horror stories, would haunt them forever. As part of our bedtime stories, remember, sometimes the most fascinating stories come from the most terrifying experiences. This one, among all scary stories and night adventures, will linger in your thoughts, becoming a part of those campfire stories shared under the dark, starry sky.